I promise, I do not like having to say I told you so, but before the election, I was shouting into the void that Project 2025 wants to make all kinds of corn, including your OF account, including the spicy romance novels you read, including that spicy fan fiction that you write. It wants to make all of those illegal. Back then, I was talking to Republican Squirrel Daddy fans who were up in arms about Peanut the squirrel getting put down, and then being like, a vote for Trump is a vote to avenge Peanut, y'all. And I was like, you dumbasses. Peanut's owner makes OF. He's a corn actor, and so is his wife. Vote for Trump is literally a vote to end his career. And everyone was like, no, that's a bunch of horse shit. That's never going to happen. And at the same time, I was also talking to conservative book talk girlies who love their spicy romance books, but were like, let's keep politics out of book talk. And I was like, girlfriends, do you not understand that Project 2025 wants to make it a crime to write, to produce, to narrate an audiobook of, to sell spicy romance novels? Also wants to criminalize all that smutty fan fiction that you write and publish on AO3 and Wattpad. And more than that, it would want to put your favorite author and narrator in prison for 10 years for every offense and force them to register as a sex offender. You want Allie Hazelwood to go to prison? You want Teddy Hamilton to be labeled as a sex offender? Project 2025 would also try to make it a crime punishable by 10 years in prison and a sex offender registration for librarians to check out adult material to you, including the written, digital, or audiobook versions of your favorite spicy romances. But before the election, all those conservative book talk girlies were like, no, Trump would never do that. Republicans, they don't really want to institute Project 2025. Well, now we know that Project 2025 is the rule book that this regime is using. Everything they're rolling out straight out of Project 2025. And a couple of months ago, we saw on a state level, states trying to change the definition of obscenity. And now we are seeing a U.S. senator introduce a bill to redefine obscenity and to make corn illegal. This is the beginning of wanting to open the door to criminalize all kinds of content that adult Americans enjoy. Now, it's not often that I reference right-leaning or libertarian sources of news, but surprise, surprise, I'm going to be reading from Reason.com today. And that's specifically because there's so many libertarians in the US who voted for Trump and all those Republicans who used to be about small government, don't tread on me, stay out of my business. Like so many libertarians who voted for Trump who don't seem to be all that outraged about the ways that he wants to be all up in your business. Finally, we have something that may have pushed the libertarians too far. Senator Mike Lee, Republican Mormon from Utah, who has likely never brought a woman to orgasm even once in his entire life, wants to redefine obscenity in a way that could render all sorts of legal sexual content illegal in the United States. His proposal would make the definition of obscenity so broad it could ban even the most mild corn, and possibly even more. Senator Mike Lee, who definitely doesn't want you to check his browser history, and Representative Mary Miller, Republican of Illinois, who introduced a companion bill in the House. By the way, if Mary Miller is your congresswoman, go ahead and give her a call now and let her know what you think. Have both made no secret of the fact that the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act, or IOTA, is intended to get corn off the internet. Our bill updates the legal definition of obscenity for the internet age so that this content can be taken down and peddlers prosecuted. You know which states have the heaviest consumption of Cornhub? All those libertarians are freaking the fuck out about this. The proposed definition of obscenity that Mike Lee is putting forth in this bill is so broad that Game of Thrones would be considered obscene. The bill makes a mockery of the First Amendment. Obscenity is one of the few categories of exemptions to the First Amendment's protection of speech. While federal law doesn't ban the possession of obscene materials, unless they involve minors, it does ban possessing or producing obscene material with the intent to sell or distribute. That's how they're going to get librarians, along with selling, sending, shipping, receiving, importing, or transporting any obscene material, or engaging in any business that does so. There is currently no federal law that strictly defines what obscenity is. It is what is known as the Miller test, which comes from a 1973 Supreme Court case, Miller v. California, and then also 1987's Pope v. Illinois. Under the Miller test, something obscene must appeal to prurient interests, depict or describe sexual acts in a patently offensive way, and, when taken as a whole, lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. If it fails to meet any of these prongs, it's not obscene. Moreover, determining whether something lacks value requires applying a reasonable person standard. And determining if something appeals to prurient interests and is offensive requires asking whether the average adult person, applying contemporary adult community standards, would think so. This is supposed to ensure that we're not declaring things criminally obscene just because some vocal minority might think that they are. Hella repressed Senator Mike Lee's IOTA Act would clarify the legal definition of obscenity for all states. It would do away with, quote, an ever-changing and elusive public opinion of what is obscene. Basically, Lee wants to replace the average person's opinion with his own personal opinion and make that the law. His own opinion seems to be that virtually any depiction of human sexuality is obscene. He thinks basically that all depictions of sexual conduct or erotic nudity count as obscenity. Anything that, quote, depicts, describes, or represents an act or simulated act, or, quote, lewd exhibition of the genitals that would arouse, titillate, or gratify the sexual desire of a person would be obscene under Mike Lee's law. The point is to loosen the definition of obscenity so it's so broad that the government is removed from any of the obligation to prove patent offensiveness. In that way, it will be much easier to target producers and creators of that material with criminal sanctions. Now, this first bill is specifically about internet content. So we're not talking paper books here yet. But Mike Lee's goal is to ensure that this dangerous material is kept out of our homes and off our screens. It's important to understand that this would likely be the first in a series of moves to criminalize adult content and people who create it and enjoy it. But it's much worse than that. The ultimate goal of Project 2025 and folks like Mike Lee is to target speech by and about LGBTQ people, especially transgender people. Remember, he wants any depiction of nudity or discussion of sexual acts or even simulated sexual acts to be deemed obscene. Also important to note that when they're coming for things like OF, they are coming for the livelihoods of tens of thousands of Americans. It's also really important to understand that when they start coming for things like spicy books and fan fiction, and they want to slap you with 10 years in federal prison and a $100,000 fine for each offense, do you know what comes next, ladies? What is it that you can't do if you are a convicted felon? You can't vote. It's important to understand everything this regime does has multiple layers of it, whether intentional or not. They absolutely want to suppress the votes of transgender folks, LGBTQ folks, women. Okay, that's enough of the Libertarian article. I now want to reference Gizmodo, who also covered this yesterday. Lee's view of corn hews closely to that of the Heritage Foundation, which has similarly sought to crush the smut industry. In its mandate for leadership, Project 2025 defines corn as the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology. It argues that all people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. You want Ruby Dixon to go to prison for Ice Planet Barbarians? You want Jacob Morgan to go to prison for narrating Lights Out? You want book publishers to be put out of business? You want it to be a federal crime to stream Game of Thrones or to read Hermione? As my kids say, I'm not shitting your dick. This is what Project 2025 wants to make a reality. Is the production, distribution, and consumption of video, print, and audio adult material. They want to make a federal crime. Mike Lee's bill is just the beginning. It's a classic fascist tactic to try to control your sexual agency, your pleasure, your reproduction, your body, your life, your mind. And that is precisely what Mike Lee, the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 are all doing through the Trump regime. So I hate saying I told you so, but when you vote for a fascist, he's going to do fascist shit. When you vote for the repressive regime, you're not going to get more freedoms. When you vote in a party that doesn't care about constitutional rights and definitely does not give a fuck about the First Amendment, definitely does not care about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, this is what you get. Maybe think about what kind of America you really want. Because God knows I can't find the clitoris to save my life, Mike Lee. He sure knows what kind of America he wants. Project 2025 and Trump, they know what kind of America they want. They're going to make sure that their version of America is what you have to deal with. It's their definitions, their restrictions, their repression that you're going to have to live under, unless we do something about it.